Welcome to Three Chicks and a Bible, where we ditch the easy answers, roll up our sleeves, and wrestle with the hard stuff in Scripture. We're talking about the real questions, the messy parts, and what it looks like to follow Jesus. No fences, no filters, just three women chasing after truth, beauty, and the wild, untamable Christ. We are so glad that you've joined us today.
What does God's goodness really mean when life feels painful, confusing, or unfair? Let's talk about it.
Well, welcome, ladies. Good to see. We haven't seen each other in a little while.
Yeah.
But so today we're going to be talking about if God is good, why is there suffering in the world? And so I want to jump right into the idea of God's goodness. Like let's begin with that, because that's an important place to just make sure we all are on the same page with even what we're talking about. So when we say God is good, what do we mean? Like biblically, what do we mean? And just as human beings, what do we mean? And are those the same? Do we mean the same thing when we say good? What does the Bible mean when it describes God as good? And does the Bible's understanding of God's goodness differ from ours? Right. So,
Yeah.
Julie, you look like you're ready to go on this one.
It just made me think of my little third grade son many years ago, and we enrolled him in football, and he was so excited about doing it. And about 3 weeks in, he came to us and said, "I don't want to be in football anymore." And we were like, "Our family, we don't quit. What's the reason?" And he said, "Well, they're not the same kind of roughness that I have roughness." And I just thought of that in terms of, and by the way, we let him quit when he told us that. Dancing around the kitchen, we were so happy because it was rough. But anyway, just the idea of that somebody's idea of something may not mean what other people think of it. And goodness is one thing I think that really gets redefined through our own experiences and our belief system. And so what I think is good may not be good to other people. And, certainly what God thinks of as good can be a lot different than what we think. Yeah. So it is good for us to lay down that foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. So when the Bible talks about God, that God is good, what is the Bible saying about goodness?
Bible's saying that, he's good. His nature is good.
Yes.
He doesn't become good or bad based on how, what he does or what we do. His goodness is not situational. He is always good. You notice in the first chapter of Genesis, everything was good. He made everything good. He is good. We are good. They are good. The animals are good. Everybody's so good. Until we get to chapter 3, and what changed? Our view of goodness changed, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. He is still good, always good. And sometimes I think I base his goodness on how I'm feeling that day. I don't like what's happening right now, so this isn't good for me. So, I base it on that, and I have to remember, no, that's not God's character. God's character is always good, no matter what is happening. I have to align myself with that, with his character, not with my emotions.
Yeah. It's hard to define good. Even, I was looking up some of the original language stuff and the Bible. It's still like, it's sort of like, what does this original Hebrew mean? Good. Okay.
Helpful.
Wow. All right. That's helpful. Right?
But what kind of good?
Yeah. Good. So thank you, original language. That was, but I think, I think about it and in the Bible, I believe it means sort of like that it has integrity, that it's all the way through. You can count on it to be a benefit to you, but, that it's something desirable. Goodness is desirable. Goodness is, so a child may not think it's good to go have your tooth pulled. And yet a parent knows, that is, it is good because that tooth is bad. And so we need to have that tooth pulled out. So, so I think that's our disconnect sometimes with God's idea of goodness, is like good for me is not always comfortable or, something that we want in our lives.
Yeah, it's not always just a blessing. We think of it as blessing. It's justice and holiness and correction and truth and moral perfection and
Mhm.
benevolence too and faithfulness. It's all those things, not just blessing that we want.
Mhm. Yeah. I think goodness too is the concept of that we can trust. We can trust him because he's good. Like in the Narnia Chronicles, right? Where they ask about Aslan, is he safe? And he goes, no, but he's good.
He's so good. Yep. I love that one.
Yeah. And so I think that takes us into the idea of suffering, because I think that's what Lewis was trying to incorporate in that understanding. Is he safe? No, but he's good. So there are, so according to the Bible, that brings us, does God allow suffering, ordain it, or simply redeem it? And does that distinction matter? Why does it matter?
Well, we've got this whole idea of God being sovereign and in control. He holds all things in his hands, and so nothing happens without his permission. Even Satan has to go to him and say, can I wreck this guy? In Job. And so, there's that whole idea that things are not just random. And so, especially if it's an attack by Satan, it's not random, and God allows some things, but it also says that he does not tempt us to sin. And so, and he doesn't lie. And, there are other character things about him that we know. So it's an interesting question. And if we can solve this in half an hour, I'd be impressed.
Yeah, I know. We're just going to open some doors on this today, I'm sure. But it's interesting, the Job piece, the opening of Job, where Satan has to go before God, and they talk about Job and God gives him permission there to do that. For me, that's communicating something that I think that a lot of people forget, that it's not a yin and yang thing with God and Satan. They're not equal powers. They don't have equal authority. They're not like Batman and the Joker or something. They're not just flip sides of a force. Satan is definitely a created being, has limited power, and so I think that's what is really being communicated there. That God is so overall that he has the greater power. He has,
Yeah. So you're asking, does he ordain it, allow it, or what was the other one? Redeem it.
Redeem it.
Yeah, ordain it. I have an issue with ordaining with it, because it makes him sound like he's this Greek god that's like, you made me mad, and now I'm going to, my vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of just almost like perverse sadism masquerading as righteousness for me. This good God, he's going to ordain suffering. Does he allow it? Okay. There's, he let the Israel or the Hebrews go into captivity, but what did he do before? He warned them and warned them and warned them and gave them chance after chance after chance, because he loved them so much he didn't want them to. He was this merciful, loving God. So to say that he ordains it, that one bothers me. But redeems it, absolutely. He sits in the middle of it with us and is there with us and says, I am going to make something good from this. Sometimes it's just our choices, it's just, maybe there's a number 4. It just happens. It just is, it's just our choices that we have to deal with. And he's like, yep, I know, I get it. Let's get through this. I'm going to redeem it.
That goes well with Romans 1. They did this and they insisted on doing this, and then God gave them up. God gave them up. In other words, he let them have what they wanted.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect for sure.
Yeah, God didn't give up on them. I just want to make sure that listeners hear that right. He gave them up to their behaviors.
Yes, or to their choices, or ideals, or whatever. Yes.
Yeah. Kind of like God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Well, did he harden his heart, or did he just allow him to be who Pharaoh was in the beginning, and not change that?
Right. So when you have that, you have that child that's just insisting, no, this is what I want. No, and you finally go, okay, like
Yeah.
give it a shot. Let's, unfortunately, you're gonna pay the consequences for that. But if you are so determined, so I think that it's, on a microcosm, that is, but
Yeah.
it's, I was thinking through biblical examples. So Job is one, Job is one of the ones where we see this idea that that God had a certain amount of control over this. That's how that's portrayed. And so, but it's also one of the few where we see everything is repaid to Job too.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's an interesting story in the Bible. Joseph, his suffering was inflicted by others, but, like his brothers are the ones that inflicted suffering on him, but then God used it for good. And then Jonah, his suffering was self-inflicted. That boy was in the whale because he didn't obey God. So there's, when we made the choice, and that's where like so much comes back to the garden. It's like such a, it's the early story, but for me, like that, we opened the door. We got that choice, and sin and death came into the world, and so now there is like, just as we have common grace, there's a common suffering, right? There's like, we live in a world of sin and death. So I feel like there's, we are so far from the garden, and people don't live thinking about the garden and Eve's choice. And so it's like easier to blame God than to say, well, we did bring this on ourselves. That's a hard truth. I mean, and that's not a truth you share with someone who's in the middle of suffering.
No.
Like it's there's a big difference between a theological understanding of suffering and a personal experience of suffering and ministering to people who suffer. Right. So there are things that we say when we're discussing the debate, but if there's someone listening right now to us talk about suffering, that's we know that you're in a personal hurting place, and that you have a very individual story within the context of all of this. And God is very able to see your individual story in all this. So don't be looking for the category that you fit in, or, I mean, because there's, like we were just talking about, there's warfare that brings suffering too. So I guess like I didn't even, so I just unintentionally segued into the next question. How should Christians respond to people suffering? What are ways that we can honor the pain of their suffering and avoid presenting pat Christian answers that diminish or dismiss their questions?
Well, I'm just thinking about the fact that suffering is not some weird thing that, that we had no idea is going to happen. 1 Peter 4:12, dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. And Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble. And so, and they hate you because you're in me. And so if they hate me, they're going to hate you. And there's a lot of places like that where Jesus was just saying, this is not going to be easy,
Right.
And Paul, identifying with Christ, he says, it has been granted to you in Philippians 1:29, on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him.
Right.
And suffering, that's part of our understanding Christ better, because he suffered the whole time he was here on the earth. And so when we are given the opportunity to suffer, not that anybody would pray for it, but it can be a time where we're really understanding Jesus a little bit more and what it was. And of course, it made him a high priest with sympathy. We don't come to a high priest who hasn't struggled with temptation, but one who's every point has struggled and yet was without sin. So he can sympathize with that because he went through it,
right,
as a man. And so it is an identification with Christ, maybe in not the way we would like to be. Like I say, I don't know anybody that prays that, oh Lord, let me suffer more for you. So, but it is, that's part of it, is identifying with him.
And so both those writers were specifically writing to the church. So, when they talk about tests, so that's a kind of suffering, a test of faith. Paul was definitely suffering for Christ to demonstrate to others So that, James says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds.
Yes.
For the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. So there are various trials. There are different reasons for them in our lives. Stacy?
I can't remember who said it, but it's to live is to suffer. And I think we just, it is who we are in our life. We're gonna suffer. Now, not everything is suffering for Christ. I mean, if you stub your toe, I'm suffering for Christ. We can't say that. But, when people are going through some serious suffering, I'm not quoting Bible verses at them. I'm sitting there with them in mercy and say, hey, let me hold your hair back while you verbally vomit this out. I'm here. I get it. I'm not going to use that time to teach or cajole them to think differently. I'm going to yeah. And you know who else understands is Jesus. He asked for that cup to be passed the day before he was crucified. He understands our suffering. I get it. And he is here with us right now. Let's just sit in this. And somehow, this dark night of the soul of our suffering, we come into this knowledge of Jesus deeper because we understand him and he understands us. And when we're honest with our suffering with people, it opens us up to others in the community, and it opens us up to Jesus so he can fill us by using those in our community. And it's just this beautiful thing that he does. So sometimes we just have to sit with people and just listen. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I'm sorry. And for those of you who are suffering, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. And God understands. He's right there.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that Job's friends, probably the one thing that they did right, was they sat and just said nothing for 7 days. They just sat with him in his sorrow and his pain.
Yeah, they sat Shiva.
Yeah, so that's where it's sometimes we leave people alone or we draw away from people who are suffering. For good reasons. We're afraid of making it worse.
Yes.
We feel like we don't know what to say, but often they just need us present. Just, and I remember like in some of my most intense times of suffering, people would say, what can I do? I don't even have the brain cells for that.
Yeah.
What can you, I don't know, if you need me to tell you what to do, then I guess I don't need you here. I didn't say that, but I know what I didn't need. I didn't need someone telling me, oh, just pray this verse.
Yeah.
Just, or to scold me, sort of chide my faith. Like, well, the Lord works, works all things together for good for those who love you, Lord. Yes, I know my Bible. I know my Father. There've been times when people say, well, this is just warfare, right? This came from the enemy.
That makes it easier.
But if I'm in a foxhole and I've been hit by fire, I can know the enemy sent it, but I'm bleeding here. I'm bleeding out. So what I would really like are some bandages and pain reliever.
Some soup. Bring me soup.
Bring me soup. Bring me, tell me that you're with me, that you're, even if you don't understand, we don't understand every kind of suffering.
Nope.
Not everybody, like we all have, you might have lost a parent, but if someone's lost a parent and there are all different ways to lose people. There's all different experiences of that grief. Sometimes it's harder when you've been close to the person, sometimes it's harder when you weren't close to that person. Because now, so you don't always know. So it's the best thing, I think, to say, tell me about your pain right now.
Yeah.
Right? Tell me.
Absolutely.
Ask a lot of, ask not a lot of questions, don't interrogate them, but, be open to them telling their story. And it's funny when you just said, made me think of Peter, that not all, or Julie, not all suffering is persecution. Peter even says, let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or as a meddler.
Yeah.
There are those people that are meddling in Christians who are meddling in people's lives, and then they get cut out and they're like, oh, I'm being persecuted for Jesus. Like, I don't think that's what it is. I think that you were in their face and in their business in a way that was obnoxious. And that wasn't, you probably should have paid attention to the signals. Then they shut the door on you. That's
Mm.
I
Yeah, I've
like
heard
how
a,
real the
Interesting.
Bible is.
Interesting.
I've heard a lot of people talk about, those horrible people that came and said, I know how you feel. I never, in my times where I really was suffering, my worst thing I probably was when my mother died. And I didn't have a clue about grief until that moment. And she died for 2 years because she had leukemia, and they had nothing that could cure that type.
Mhm.
But I never got mad at people because I felt like they're trying to reach out. They don't know what to say, but they love me, and that's why they're just, trying to hold my hand through it. And they can make a claim you don't, and I think to myself, well, probably you don't know, but it's okay because I'm looking at the intent
Mhm.
and not so much the awkwardness with which people express themselves.
Mhm.
But one thing that suffering did for me, and when my mother died, and it was a terrible, terrible time for me. But one thing it did was it caused me to have to clarify some of the things I thought about God,
Mhm.
and that didn't happen. When I first heard she had leukemia, I was, first, hoping, of course, that God would heal her because she's only 68. But it was, and I was like 42 or something. I mean, young to be
Mhm.
losing your mom. And so
Yeah.
anyway, my sister was even way younger than me. So, but I just thought, maybe he'll heal her, maybe he won't. And then we found out it was a kind that they couldn't cure. And so, but this is what I assumed.
Mhm.
I assumed that because I belonged to Christ, that my grieving would not be the same as other people's grieving. And of
Mm.
course, Peter says that, right? And so I thought, I'm just going to keep close to the Lord and keep crying out to him, and he will minister to me through this time. And what did I get? Crickets.
Mm.
Nothing. Like
Mm.
shouting into the wind. And so that was so disturbing to me because I was okay, unhappy, but okay with him taking her, which he did. But I expected him to be more real, and yet he
Yeah.
was quiet. And I look back now and I see little ways in which he did demonstrate his love for me, but I was so blinded by grief I couldn't, do anything. So I had to kind of re-look at what I thought about God, and that took a lot of all those platitudes that we heard when we were
Mm.
younger. I had to say maybe, maybe not. And I started really looking into his character. I read book Job several times. I got a lot because he was silent for Job for 37 chapters.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So silence of God, not new. Me and Job at least did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, those kinds of things where I really had to look and say, okay, so some of what I assumed about God was not true.
Mhm.
And somehow with all the things that I've been taught or told or read, even in the Bible, I put this package together, what I thought God was. And then when he wasn't that, I was like, does he exist? Or
Mm.
maybe I could, because like I said at the beginning, when we are perceiving him in action or seeing he's not acting at the moment, which
Mhm.
is the hard one, we're perceiving it through the lens of our experiences, of what
Mhm.
we've been taught, of, that kind of thing. And if it's not, it doesn't come out right. It's not that God did something wrong. It's that we didn't understand him correctly.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
so it's really a case of when we're disillusioned is to go back and say, okay, so what was I expecting, and what really, can I expect,
Yeah.
knowing who he is and what his goodness means.
Yeah. See, I think, and for listening to you, I think how um, one of the things that we should do, or that we can do with people who are suffering, is ask them, so where are you seeing God in this right now?
Yes.
Because the
Mhm.
language that you used about like God took her, right? That's, you can say that easily because of your incredible long-standing relationship with God, your experience with him, your
Mhm.
complete trust in him. Whereas someone else may hear he took her and they're like, I didn't want him to take my child, or I didn't want him to take, so like to ask people, before we start using our language, because then that informs our language, to ask them, where do you see God in this? They're like, I don't see him anywhere, or I see him as like, well, he's in charge and he's doing this. So then to like, we can, just like Paul use different language in different cultures. Like we need to hear what the culture of their suffering is at the moment, and what words they're using, their understanding, before we open our mouths. Sometimes that can help.
Never a bad idea to point someone to God.
Yeah, without
He can
preaching.
take it.
Yeah. I know that when I went through a season where it was like huge periods of suffering in my life, like back to back. And like one thing that was hard for me, and there are people out there, there are listeners I know who are going through like a season of suffering where it's not like one big crisis in your life, it's like four came rolling in back to back.
Yep.
And what was hard for me was like probably the third thing that happened was like, was almost killed by this killer dog. Like the owner had trained the dog to kill, and I was like on the receiving end of that. People acted like, oh my goodness, like what else is going to happen to you? Or like, seriously, like why is all this, like I really felt like they were blaming me. I felt like the things that they were saying weren't, weren't very helpful to my own wrestling. Like I felt like, wow, this is kind of over the top, don't you think, Lord? Like, haven't I been through like three major things and now I'm almost killed by a killer dog? That's so like, people's exhaustion with my suffering was hard for me. It made me want to like diminish it, like, or put it aside, or not. I had to really narrow the number of people that I went to for comfort or support, because I felt like, I knew they weren't trying to hurt me. I knew they weren't trying to add to what I was going through, but their exhaustion with my suffering was like, dude, okay, wow, I am exhausted, because I care about people. I don't want to add pain to people's lives. So I withdrew a little bit more, because like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I don't want to exhaust you or hurt you. Now I feel like my suffering is wearing you out. Okay, that's or they would have their own questions about God because I was suffering, and I was like, I don't think I can help you with that. No.
Yeah.
But he does take those times. You can call it the wilderness experience, or the silence of God, or whatever. But he does take those times. And I read a quote: "For those who know him, suffering often becomes one of the clearest places where his reality is experienced."
Yes.
Who he is experienced. Pain by itself proves nothing, but what God does through it can reveal everything. It's not the proof that God's absent. Sometimes it's the place where his presence becomes undeniable. And so we learn about him, sometimes the hard way, but we learn about him through the suffering, because it takes all the things that you thought, and it just all of a sudden gives us a crystal clear, focused understanding of something. I know when my mom was dying, she wrote me a note from the hospital down in Houston, and she wrote and said, I'm not sorry this has happened to me, because it has made me understand my priorities and what's most important.
Yeah.
And I lost that card. I could just kick myself that I did, but I think of it all the time, because, to be able to say in the middle of the suffering, I'm not sorry, because I'm changed. And I value that more than being comfortable.
Yeah.
And so it can be that, but again, just pointing people to the Lord and Jesus suffering. Well, you want to talk about somebody that suffered in so many ways, and not just on the cross, his whole life through the rejection, the betrayal, the people misunderstanding him, not feeling like, anybody gets it, all of those things, Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, and, his family rejecting him. And there's just so much that he went through, felt it as a human. And so if we're following a suffering Savior, It's just,
Gonna
like I
happen.
said, one way to relate to him.
Mhm.
So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
but we
Yep.
have to stick with what we know to be true about God. That's got to be the bottom line. Um, and even when people stood at the cross, everything looked terrible, everything looked wrong, and yet that moment was the greatest display of God's goodness ever.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
So it can look so bad, and yet it can be so good in the end, how God changes it to that. So,
Yeah, I can think back on times that I've suffered, and every time I can say I don't want to go through that again because that was not good, but I
Mhm.
thank God for it. Now, I say this from my privilege here in America, and of the suffering that I have to face. I'm not getting beheaded. I'm not, facing a firing squad or something, or being crucified for my beliefs, but I still suffer, and I can still thank God for it because I've learned, one, his character in a deeper way, and I've learned my character in a deeper
yes.
way. And those two tend to line up better after suffering than they did before. Even though I don't want to go through it again because it was hell. But I thank God for it because he didn't leave me in it, and he used it. He redeemed it for his glory, for his good.
Yeah.
And mine. And mine.
I heard an interview with Helen Roseveare. She was a British medical missionary, and she was stationed in a country in Africa that underwent like a whole regime change while she was there. And during that time, there were soldiers that attacked their compound and took them hostage. And Helen was a young woman, and she was, they abused her and sexually assaulted her. And so when she was released and went back to England, she was treated and healed, but she went back to that country. And when she was 85, there's an interview with her, and the interviewer asked her, like, you went through this horrible experience. Like, was it worth it? And she said, you're asking the wrong questions.
Mm.
Was it worth it? The question is he worthy?
Mm.
And she said, he's worthy of everything I would suffer. Like, and there are people who suffered greater things. There are women in that country who are, endure rape all the time. Whenever soldiers take over, they go through regime change all the time. And so she said, Jesus is worthy of everything that I've endured to get people the message of him.
Mm.
And so that was, I mean, that really impressed me. But like she would never say what happened to her was a good thing. Like, that's what I
Right.
think sometimes
Right.
we miscommunicate in this whole thing is not that the things that happen to us are good. They never become good things, but
Right.
he brings good out of them in our
He is
lives,
good.
Right.
and he transforms it.
That's right.
So
He is good.
so we might have like kind of covered this, but what role do you think that free will, a fallen world, and spiritual warfare play in suffering? And how do we hold those together without oversimplifying? Like, we'll probably oversimplify because we're not going to be talking for 8 hours on this
Right. Gotta
podcast.
break it down.
So I'll just start. I feel like, when people ask questions, and they're really like, they're angry with God, or they don't believe he's there because of their suffering, or their suffering has driven them to a place. I'm very careful about giving them answers, because I'll say, well, let's look at a story from someone, because God doesn't, in the Bible, he doesn't lay out all the answers. He didn't with Job. He didn't like say, okay, Job, you've got all these questions. When he did respond to Job, he described himself.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, look at who I am. And for me, that's like, look, like, those are great questions. And I have answers that I've worked out for myself through my relationship with God and through my own suffering. And I want to be careful not to short circuit your process. That it's important for you to wrestle through those questions. It's important. I can tell you for sure that God is good and that he is open to your questions. And read the book of Psalms. Look at all the ways that David brought his pain to God. and
Mhm.
find those psalms and see where you can find some direction. But unless they say to me, well, I really need a specific answer about this, like, okay, let's look at that together. But I try hard not to. I mean, that's how I try to avoid cliches and oversimplifying, is by here are some possibilities of what it could be. Yep, could be spiritual warfare, could be that you live in a fallen world,
Mhm.
depending on the circumstance. It could be a result of your own actions, or
Actions.
the
Mhm.
actions of people around you. It could be because you did a good thing. It could be, Helen Roosevelt was doing a good thing. She was a medical missionary bringing the news of Jesus someplace. And that's why she, and endured that suffering because of other people's sin. But, you know, your thoughts?
Mhm.
I have the same thoughts. I mean, we live in a fallen world.
Yes.
People are going to hurt one another. We're going to make bad choices. Stuff happens. It's just life. It is. It is what we live with. I mean, we have to live with the consequences of our choices. We have to live with the consequences of other people's choices on us. And yet there's God that is right there in the middle of it. And if we remember his character when we're going through it, we can say, okay, his character is one of justice, of mercy, of peace, of goodness, all his faithfulness. He is not going to leave me in the middle of this. So we can rely on that. I can't trust in, myself sometimes, and I can't trust in other people, but I can trust him in this suffering. And he redeems it and makes it all worth it in the end. So yeah, fallen world, spiritual warfare, all that. It all factors in, all of it.
Mhm. I mean, the first thing God did when that sin happened in the garden was let them know, okay, everything's different now.
Yeah.
You've introduced sin into the world, and so this is what life is going to look like. And he talked about, Eve desiring her husband, and he was going to rule over. Talked about Adam working through in both of those words, there was a word labor involved,
Mm-hmm.
and labor and childbirth. And then Adam with the weeds and it changed everything, and it changed the relationship. This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Adam was psyched when Eve was created. And then next chapter, they're throwing each other under the bus.
Right.
Right? The whole relationship had changed. So that's the reality of sin. And that's the reality of where we live and our present state.
Mm-hmm.
We have been freed from the slavery of sin,
Mm-hmm.
and given potential in order to be able to please God. But we're still faced with sin every single day, whether in ourselves or other people, or Paul says creation is groaning,
Mm-hmm.
waiting for release from this whole curse of sin. So that's the reality of things. So we shouldn't be surprised when bad things happen, just because um, it's because we wrecked it a long time ago.
Yeah.
But um, but so what did Hebrews tell us? Hold on firmly to the hope we possess, because he who promised is faithful. Jesus
Mm-hmm.
has promised he's coming back. He's going to rule with justice. He's going to get this world back to the place that it was before the fall. He's going to do all those things, and we're waiting on it. We're groaning for it, but that's the reality. So the
Mm-hmm.
reality of our present versus the hope of our future. And that's, I think, the thing we have to hang on to. Someday, people won't be losing their mothers. Someday we won't be in fear of being raped. There's something better coming, and that's a hope that we can profess. And Jesus is faithful, and he'll do it. He said he's going to do it. He'll do it. So that, bottom line, is where we put our hope. And no matter what it looks like on this side of eternity, we can still rest in those promises.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a real, I think, we live in relative safety here in America. And while people maybe don't like us because we're Christians, or, they give us a hard time because we're Christians, some people have had family members cut them off because they're Christians. But there are people who are in other countries who are imprisoned, or they lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yes.
immediately homeless upon becoming Christians, and jobless. Or they have no hope of advancement in life because of their faith.
Right.
or or they're beaten repeatedly. And so I feel like those, like, we should spend more time listening to people who have suffered and
Mhm.
continued in their relationship with Christ, because they have information, wisdom, and experience of Jesus that can inform us and that can fortify us. And we should,
Mhm.
say, tell me how just like that missionary, or what's your perspective? What got you through that when your pastor husband has been imprisoned 20 times and your family's been left with scraps? How has that impacted your understanding of God? Where has God been for you in that? And we can access that through articles and stuff now. But as we encounter people, just say, like, it's a good question to ask people. Say, think about the times that you've suffered. How has that impacted your relationship with God, and how? Because we love the answered prayer in the American church. Like, we love that. We love sharing prayer answers. We love that. And there were, during that time where I was, long time of suffering, I would get kind of tired, because, like, what about those of us, who have the same prayer request week after week for the same addicted person or whatever? But I think that, like, if we could incorporate that into our body life a little more. Okay, those of you who've been suffering for a while, talk to us about where God is for you in that. Because I think that there's value for that for all of us, not just the answered prayer testimonies, but the unanswered prayer testimonies. Where's God for you in this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
Any final thoughts on suffering before we close on our fun question of the
This is great
podcast?
fun. I guess my final thoughts would be, if you know the character of God, that he is so, so good, when bad things happen, we won't ask why. Why is this happening? But we can turn it to, okay, how are you going to redeem this? And we can partner with him in our suffering. Okay, I know you're going to redeem this somehow. I don't know if I'll see it, but I know you will. So show me how I can partner with you. And then it brings us together with God instead of separating us from God, because the why questions separate us. And he wants us to ask those questions. Those are important. I get it. But they separate us because they put a divide in who we think God is. And so the how, okay, how can I partner with you in this? And it helps us draw closer to God in our suffering. And we don't feel like lone wolves out there doing this on our own. I'm suffering with Christ. I'm suffering with God. There is something that's going to come out of this. I don't know when, I don't know how, I might not see it, but I trust his goodness and his character that it will.
Julie, any final thought?
Yeah, I wanted to read 2 Corinthians 4. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. We're going to be rewarded for suffering. That's kind of a crazy thought. But because if we're, and of course, everything done in faith is what pleases God. So if we just hang on there and say, God, I know you, I know who you are, and I don't understand, but that doesn't mean you're not at work. And it doesn't mean that my understanding is without flaw. And so those kinds of things. But so we fix our eyes not on what's seen, not on what we look around us at, but on what's unseen. In the unseen world, God is at work and doing the things. And we can trust him because he's good. And so that's kind of the bottom line for me is know that eternal thought is a reality as much as the situation is right now in our lives.
I love that. And one way to definitely avoid pat answers is, like, while Christians sometimes give them, the Bible doesn't give pat answers. The Bible really respects and honors suffering. When the apostles were writing these encouragements, they were being repeatedly beaten, imprisoned, they were losing friends, they were losing family, there were people dying for their faith. There were there were the everyday sufferings of like more disease than we can imagine, or being robbed on the road, that kind of thing. So, they come from a place of experience when they say these things. Light and momentary troubles is, like when he says that, he's using kind of a little bit of sarcasm there, or like, he's not experiencing like what we would
I
consider
just
light
got
and
whipped.
momentary troubles. Right. I've just been beaten for the 15th time and left to die. So I like that the Bible, comes at things from, honoring the complexity of
Yeah.
our lives and of who God is, and doesn't just say, here's the answer. It says, here is God. Here is God, and he is here for us. So
I love
My
that.
favorite verse in the Psalms, he holds our tears in a bottle. I
Mm.
think it's the Psalms, might be Isaiah, but anyway, it's in there. But he cares.
Somewhere.
He cares. He knows how many hairs we have in our head, and he knows the tears that we've shed. And Jesus wept along with Mary and Martha, seeing their suffering.
Yeah.
And he's a compassionate, merciful God, and he hears us, and he's with us always, and so we can depend on his goodness, even when things are grim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So so we know, if you're listening, this wasn't the be all and end all a podcast on suffering, because there's a lot to say and wrestle with suffering in this world. But yeah, it is God. So to close on a lighter note, name one Bible character you relate to and why.
100% Peter. 100% Peter. That would be me. I am the impetuous jump out of the boat. If that's you, here I come, kind of, and then speak before I think sometimes. Yeah, that would be me. I love him. And I love the character on the show The Chosen, Peter. I mean, he's the cutest one, so I really like him.
That's not superficial.
No, I didn't say I'm always deep.
Who I relate to, I mean, there's a lot that I admire, and I would say probably Peter the most in relating to. But I look at Joseph, who kind of fits in with this whole thing. He had heard from God that he was going to work through his generation, just like he had through his father's and his father's father, and he was excited about it. A lot of people call him, the spoiled brat, but it was the first time God had spoken to his generation, and he hung on to what God showed him in those dreams the whole time. He was in slavery and in prison, and he just kept his eye on the prize, which was God was going to redeem his people. And so that's who I'd like to be, is that person, and not be looking all the time at what's around me or the hard things, but no, there's a plan, and God will accomplish what he said he was going to accomplish, and I can just hang on and just wait to see it happen and just be faithful in the meantime.
That's great.
Love it.
Great. Well, mine definitely is Peter too. Like I'm always like rushing ahead of the Lord, always ready to be like, oh, well, I know what's going to happen now. Like, and oh no, this isn't going to, don't do this. Or, I have great faith. One minute I'm out of the boat, and the next minute I'm under the waves going, whoop, no, that was not it. So, I definitely relate to Peter. I definitely, the Lord has certainly scolded me any number of times, and yet he always cooks fish for me on the beach and welcomes me home. And so that's and I can be one like, well, what about that person? And the Lord's like, get your eyes on your own paper, Lori. Like that's like I'll take care of everybody. Don't worry about it. So yeah, definitely is Peter for me too.
Yeah, that's funny. We're all saying Peter.
Yeah.
And how'd you like to be the character in the Bible? Everybody goes, oh, in my worst moments, I'm just like Peter.
Well, in my best moments, I am too. The faith, and how hard can it be? Oh, I'm going to do this. And a lot of times I do.
Lord, I'd go to the death for you.
And he did.
Yep, he did.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, ladies. Well, as always, it's a privilege to spend time with you and talk about stuff. So I love you very much, and we love our listeners. So if you're suffering and you need us to pray for you, please let us know, and we will. And Until next time, thanks very much.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you for
See ya.
listening.
You've been listening to 3 Chicks and a Bible. Don't stop now. Keep asking the hard questions. Check out our website at 3chicksandabible.com, where you can respond to this episode, find out more about the 3 Chicks, and submit questions for a future episode. Subscribe to our show from anywhere you get your podcasts. As always, thank you for stopping by.